A very happy new year to all of you. Today, let's talk about performance reviews, performance management, the good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of debate and discussion has been going on this topic for the last couple of years or so, with people saying that these performance management systems, performance reviews are pretty useless. The huge amount of time and energy that goes into them are not really worth it. And some others saying they're still extremely useful, even though there are lots of issues with them. So, today, what I will do before we get into that discussion is to cover a couple of psychology concepts, research findings from psychology, which are very relevant to this topic. The first psychology concept that I want to cover is employee motivation and engagement. So, there has been a lot of psychology research on this topic, which reveals that for tasks or jobs that require even a little bit of creativity and have complexity in them, intrinsic motivation, that is, the internal motivation of employees to do this job, does not increase when we provide monetary rewards, material benefits for doing the job, right? So the pay for performance culture that we're talking about itself is under question based on the evidence. So, what does improve intrinsic motivation? I don't want to get into too many details here, but there are a lot of theories on this, and the most research based, evidence supported one is the SDT or the self determination theory, which says that there are a few essential things like autonomy, relatedness, etc., which are important for intrinsic motivation. So, autonomy is basically the need to do your work the way you think is best to give results, right? So, within broad constraints, you are free to choose how you do a task, right? Nobody gets into the nitty gritty, nobody gets into the details, nobody micromanages you. You also need to feel that you're a part of a team, you belong in the team, you can trust each other in the team to work together. You also need to know that you can learn and develop your skills on the job to improve and become an expert. And also that your job contributes towards something larger than yourself, right? So these are all the things which are essential for intrinsic motivation, and material rewards and punishments do not provide intrinsic motivation at all. On the contrary, they may even reduce it a little bit. Moving on to the next psychology concept, a lot of research from neuroplasticity, mindset, grit, hardiness, resilience, etc., reveals that excellence, success, expertise is a long term process of learning, development, and improvement. Lot of practice makes perfect. So, you would have heard in this context the concept of 10,000 hours, which was originally a concept given by Anders Ericsson and Robert Poole in their book called Peak, but also later popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. So, 10,000 hours of practice is essentially, roughly, approximately, the average time of about 10 years that it takes somebody to become an expert or a master at what they do. That much of constant practice and improvement. And again, Erickson and Poole take this further in their book, The Peak, where they talk about purposeful or dedicated effort, purposeful or dedicated practice, which is not just repeating the same thing over and over, but also practicing or working on something, challenging yourself, getting out of your comfort zone, focused effort with feedback on how you're doing, as well as preferably with coaching, guidance, and mentoring. So, that is what you actually require for long term success, for long term excellence, to develop sustainable expertise and excellence. Which means that measuring your performance once or twice a year, the short term performance once or twice a year, really will not tell you much about a person's potential or a person's capabilities. You need to measure their long term performance, how they grow, how they learn, how they improve, how they develop over time. So, those are some of the research findings which go against what most organizations are doing today as far as performance management goes, which is probably why a lot of surveys on employee satisfaction, which survey employees and leaders, tell us that very few people are actually satisfied with their performance management process. And data also reveals that they do not really improve people's performance much, maybe once or twice, or maybe rarely. But as a rule, the performance management systems do not improve employee and leaders' performance. But on the other hand, we cannot do away with performance management altogether because that also is something which employees and leaders say they cannot do without. So people would probably be more unhappy without a performance management system. So we need to fix or try and fix most of the gaps in these performance management systems. And how do we do that? So here are some suggestions on how we can do that. So, the first suggestion is to de-link the feedback, the performance feedback from the monetary rewards, that is, the pay hikes, the performance bonuses, and the promotion process. So, de-link the two. When we talk about feedback, feedback cannot just be done once or twice a year. It needs to be far more frequent than that. Not only does it have to be more frequent, but the feedback has to be constructive, uh, positive in a way that it tells them what to do, what to improve on, what they're doing well, and what additional skills they need to develop, as well as it needs to be open. It needs to be transparent without having any hidden agendas, any ulterior motives. So open, constructive, frequent, informal feedback is what really is effective. Now, you need to capture this feedback as well in a system because you then have a track record of longer term performance with every milestone, right? Every deliverable of the employee or leader, you get a snapshot of how they performed, the details of this performance, what they can improve on, etc. And research shows that this gives a far more objective evaluation of their performance, right? When you capture it at every milestone, at every deliverable, and you capture it in an open, informal way, as well as share it with them, this results in far less bias. I'm not getting into bias here, that's a whole different discussion and it'll take a lot of time. But we know that there is bias in performance evaluations. So, to minimize the bias, it helps to have frequent feedback, frequent, informal, open, constructive feedback, recording it so that when you're looking at what pay hike to give that employee or what performance bonus or if they're ready for a promotion, you have a far more objective, longer term, detailed view of the employee's performance as well as their potential and capabilities. And also, when we talk about performance feedback, just having a feedback from your supervisor really does not cut it. So, your peers, your subordinates, anybody who works with you or has interacted with you at some point should be able to provide a feedback which will give a comprehensive 360-degree view of how that employee or leader has done. So that is the first thing. Then we come to the monetary rewards. How do we do that? Now, when we talk about monetary rewards, these should include as factors for evaluation not just long term performance, but should also include things like their mindset, their attitude, how resilient they are, right? How much they're able to learn and develop, how flexible they are in their attitudes, and it should also depend on organizational needs and what the organization needs at the moment. The next thing to focus on is learning and development. This should be an essential part of every organization's culture. It should not be just something which is mandated every year, right? Where a lot of organizations mandate several hours of training for employees and leaders. And what usually happens is people put it off till the last minute and then end up taking a bunch of courses which they may not really need, or end up signing up for training that they don't really need, and they may not be fully engaged or get the most out of that training. Instead of that, if training is part of the organizational culture and is valued by everybody, top to bottom, then people will be far more engaged. People will get the most out of that training and it will be relevant for their growth. It will be relevant for them to brush up on their skills and develop new ones, right? Now, one thing you need to remember is when we talk about learning and development, people tend to focus on training programs, on workshops, on online training. But actually, a lot of training happens on the job, right? When somebody is coaching you, guiding you when you're new to a job, when you're doing cross rotation across projects to learn different ways something can be done, when you're working across teams, working with people across many teams, that's also something which is part of training, right? When you're learning how to cooperate. Now, learning how to cooperate, being a team player, is a very, very important thing you need to look for in a person, right? And this is something you will not necessarily develop if you're working in the same team right from the beginning. You need to switch teams, you need to switch supervisors, you need to switch projects, and then you will be able to pick up all those different skills and work out how to work better with different people and get things done. So, learning and development should be an important part of the performance management process. One of the questions or doubts that you may have is when we're talking about 10,000 hours of practice, long term learning and development to build up your expertise, to build up your mastery or your excellence in a particular area. How is that possible given today's dynamic environments? Things keep changing, technologies come and go. There are totally new areas which suddenly become hot. Other areas which were hot till last year are no longer, in demand. How do we manage it then? When we talk about 10,000 hours of practice, we are not talking about very specialized areas, but we're talking about 10,000 hours of practice in a generic core skill, right? So, for example, if you're very strong in coding, different environments, different combinations, different technologies, if you build up your 10,000 hours in that generic area, then whatever technology may come, today it may be AI, it may be machine learning, but tomorrow it may be something else. But if you build up that 10,000 hours of core skills, it'll be easier for you to pick up a new technology when it comes, right? It'll be far easier than if you've just focused on one special skill and you've not had time to build 10,000 hours of expertise on it, right? The other thing which people need to pick up on when we're talking about skills is skills like adaptability, resilience, agility, flexibility, cooperation, team spirit. So these are also very essential skills which you need to put up, maybe not 10,000 hours, but this is a skill that you need to practice, work, and improve on. So these are very essential skills which you need to pick up and put in 10,000 hours. Focus on your core areas, generic areas, rather than just focusing on one specialized skill. So, those are some of the things that you can do to improve your performance management systems and make them less imperfect and more effective in your organizations and teams. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe. And thank you for watching. A Happy New Year again.